Hello students, in this session we will going to complete the whole income tax computation chapter. This is the third session of the income tax computation. In the first session we have seen the basics aspect, the pro formas and the reliefs and personal allowance kind of the things. In the last session we have completed the two most important concepts, which are the tax rates and tax liability calculation, as well as the extension of the bands. Okay. Now in this session, students, we will going to cover the three concepts. The first one is the marriage allowance, then the second one is the child benefit income tax charge, and the third one is the residential status. Students, let's start with the marriage allowance. Students, this lecture is once again the important one for the taxation as well as the advanced taxation students. This whole chapter is important for both the kinds of the students. So students, marriage allowance, let me start with the marriage allowance. Just a second. Yes, I forgot to connect the wire. Just a second. Yes, students, I hope you can see the screen perfectly now. And yes, we were talking about the marriage allowance, specifically the marriage allowance. Students, it's not, marriage allowance is nothing but the transfer of personal allowance. Please remember, the transfer of personal allowance will be called as a marriage allowance. Students, the same kind of the concept we have seen when we were studying the inheritance tax. At that time also we have seen the residence nil rate band and the normal nil rate band kind of the words we have used, and at that time also we have studied the concept of transfer of nil rate band. Okay, so that means that it is very clear over here once again that if there is a husband and if there is a wife, so they can transfer the personal allowance over here. So students, it's called a marriage allowance. Just like over there, students, we have seen the residence nil rate band can be transferred to the spouse. Once again over here the marriage allowance is nothing but the transfer of personal allowance, but once again over here, students, it can be transferred to spouse only. Husband cannot transfer the personal allowance to son or daughter. No, it's not possible. It's only and only possible if the receiving party is a spouse. Okay. Now students, the second condition, first condition we have studied, and that is nothing but the transfer can be made to the spouse only. And the second most important condition, which usually students forgets, is that both the parties, the husband as well as wife, both the parties has to be the basic rate taxpayer. Both the parties compulsorily has to be the basic rate taxpayer. That means that both the parties, both the persons, taxable income should be less than 37,500, because that is the maximum limit of basic rate band. If you are having the income more than 37,500, then you will be the higher rate taxpayer. Okay, but to claim the marriage allowance, to have the benefit of the transfer of personal allowance, students, both the parties compulsorily be needed to be a basic rate taxpayer, students. Otherwise one party cannot transfer the personal allowance to other one. Okay, so now students, what will happen if suppose both the conditions are getting fulfilled? Okay, so now students, the transfer of personal allowance, it's very obvious that will only help if suppose assume that there is a wife who is having the income, who is having the taxable income of suppose 5,000 pound only. Okay, or net income of suppose 5,000 only. Then if suppose this wife is having the net income of 5,000, then in that case what will happen, that students, then after we will going to deduct the personal allowance of wife. Now wife herself will get the personal allowance of 12,500, but we do not have that much amount of the net income. So what we will going to do, we will going to deduct the personal allowance of 5,000 only. Only and only 5,000 of personal allowance will be used by wife. So here we can say that taxable income will be 0. Okay, but students, if you see, the taxable income that if you remember the concept of the personal allowance, I may have told you that if you can utilize your personal allowance, then it's okay. If you do not utilize your personal allowance, the unused amount will be wasted. So over here we can say that wife, out of the 12,500 of the personal allowance, wife have used 5,000 of the PA only. So the remaining almost students, remaining 7,500 of the personal allowance is totally unused. 7,500 is the unused amount of the personal allowance, unused personal allowance by wife. So you will tell me that, okay sir, so as the wife is having the unused personal allowance, sir, let's just transfer this unused personal allowance to the husband, to the other spouse, and let's just claim the marriage allowance. Okay, so students, I know that you are going into the right direction. You are perfect, that if the one spouse is having the unused personal allowance, then and then only, students, that unused portion should be transferred. Otherwise there is no benefit, students, of transferring the personal allowance. Okay, so obviously the unused portion should only be transferred, because that is the amount that otherwise will going to be wasted. Okay, right now. So you are okay, right? But before deciding, before directly just transferring, students, we have to see that what exactly is the husband's income. As I told you, students, the husband's income should also be, students, the less than 37,500. So assume that the husband is having the net income of 40,000 pounds. So you will tell me that, sir, no, here the transfer of personal allowance or marriage allowance will not be possible, because the person is having the income of 40,000. Sir, it's more than 37,500. Students, this is just a net income. Whether the person is a basic rate taxpayer or a higher rate taxpayer will be decided. It will be depend upon the taxable income. It's the 40,000 is not a taxable income. Please remember. Okay, so for that, to determine whether the husband is a basic rate taxpayer or a higher rate taxpayer, we have to calculate the taxable income. Okay, so that is why, students, first of all, out of the net income, I will deduct the personal allowance of husband. Husband himself will get the personal allowance of 12,500. Okay, so that I will going to deduct. After deducting that, I can say that husband's taxable income is 27,500. This is the taxable income. Now we can say that, students, the husband is a basic rate taxpayer, because the husband's taxable income is less than 37,500. It's just 27,500. Now we can say that the transfer of PA can be possible, or marriage allowance is possible. Okay, students, first of all, the first step to claim the marriage allowance is that to determine that whether you can claim the marriage allowance or not. It's not about the amount right now. The amount, determining the amount, is the second step, but first of all you have to confirm that whether we can claim marriage allowance or not, whether the transfer of personal allowance is possible or not. So first of all, it's very clear that yes, you can, both the parties are basic rate taxpayer, and you can claim the marriage allowance. But now, students, you will tell me that, sir, yes, as we can claim marriage allowance, let's just transfer 7,500, whatever is the unused amount is that, let's just transfer the amount to husband. Students, HMRC made the rule that you cannot transfer any amount to the spouse. You cannot claim any amount as a marriage allowance. The only and only 1,250 pound, or the 1,250 pound only can be transferred to the spouse. 1,250 pound only can be claimed as a marriage allowance. So that means that husband will get the total personal allowance. Husband, the receiving party, will get his own personal allowance of 12,500, as well as he will get marriage allowance of only and only 1,250, students. Even if I know that even if the unused amount is more than that amount, it's 7,500, it's a very superb amount, but the rule is saying that the transfer can only and only be possible up to max 1,250, not more than that. Okay, so that is the second rule, students, that you cannot transfer any amount, any unused amount cannot be transferred. The maximum limit is 1250. Okay, now students, the third rule or the third twist is coming into the picture. Okay, so first twist was that the taxable income should be considered and not the net income. Second twist was that the maximum person marriage allowance is 1250, right? That you cannot transfer any amount. It's a important thing. And the third twist is that you cannot directly transfer this 1250. You have to determine that if I transfer this 1250 to the husband, then how much tax benefit will husband will get. Okay, so if we transfer personal allowance of 1250, then how much tax benefit the husband will get? So if we transfer 1250, then husband will get a tax benefit at a 20% rate. You will tell me that, sir, how you determine the 20%? So students, either the person can get tax benefit at a 20% or 40% or 45% rate, not more than that. But here, as we already know that both the parties are basic rate taxpayer, the maximum tax benefit can be possible is a 20%, because both the parties are basic rate taxpayer. So we can say that the husband, by receiving 1250 of the personal allowance, husband will get the tax benefit of 20%. And if you calculate the tax benefit in amount, tax benefit of 20% will be nothing but it will be £250. 250 means 1250 multiplied by 20% tax benefit. So husband will get reduction in their tax liability by £250. Husband's tax liability will be reduced by £250 if husband claims the marriage allowance of 1250. Okay, I hope you are getting this point. Okay, first of all, this is the logic behind this whole things. Okay, so that is why HMRC is saying that, okay, we got the idea that what will happen in this situation. So let's do one thing. We suggested HMRC that HMRC, as we are qualifying to claim marriage allowance, let us give the more personal allowance over here. Let us give 12500 as an our own personal allowance, as well as 1250 of the marriage allowance. Okay, so let us claim the more personal allowance. So HMRC said that no, we don't want to change our main pro forma of the calculation, so let it be 12500, 12,500 husband's own personal allowance. So we said them, sir, HMRC, as we are qualifying for marriage allowance of 1250, how we will going to get this tax benefit out of this 1250? Okay, so where you will going to give us the deduction of this particular 1250, which is the marriage allowance, because you denied directly to claim benefit, you denied directly to claim deduction over here. Otherwise we can directly deduct along with the personal allowance. Okay, how? Like simply you claim personal allowance of like this. Personal allowance of husband is 12,500, and along with that I will going to deduct marriage allowance of 1250, right? I will get both the deduction over here. I will automatically get my tax benefit, and automatically my taxable income will be reduced. Okay, because I have claimed marriage allowance along with the pro forma. Right? It's a direct method of claiming the tax benefit. But HMRC said that no, you are not allowed to claim marriage allowance over here. Okay, so please remember, even if it is a marriage allowance, even if it is a transfer of personal allowance, the marriage allowance cannot be written in the pro forma, in the normal pro forma. It cannot be written along with your normal personal allowance. So even if you are claiming marriage allowance, your taxable income will remain same. It will be 27,500, whatever was that taxable income. So then we went to HMRC that please HMRC guide us how we can take up the tax benefit from this marriage allowance, or where we can deduct this 1250 amount, right? So okay, so HMRC have guided us and they have given one method to claim the marriage allowance of 1250, and they told us to claim the marriage allowance at the last. So HMRC told us that once you are having the taxable income, just calculate your tax liability. Just calculate your tax liability. So we already know how to calculate tax liability. As we are having the taxable income of 27,500, assume that it's a known savings income of 27,500. What we will going to do? First of all, we will going to utilize our starting rate band. It's a 5,000 pound of the starting rate band. 5,000, multiply it with 20%, and then after we will going to 5,000 utilized of the starting rate band against known savings income. So my starting rate band is now 0, and then after we will going to utilize my basic rate band, which is 32,500. So but my income is not that much, even if I do have capacity in my basic rate band, but my income is very less. Now my remaining income is 22,500 only, which I will going to utilize against my basic rate band 22,500 utilized against known savings income. Okay, so I can say I will have my tax liability. Assume that if you do the total and everything, your tax liability will be 5630. This is your final tax liability to HMRC. So now HMRC will tell that now you can claim your marriage allowance of 1250. But now students, the 1250 is a marriage allowance, and this amount is your tax liability. This is your final tax liability. So HMRC said that you cannot deduct 1250, but you can deduct only and only 20% of that 1250. 1250 multiplied by 20%. Why 1250 into 20%? Because out of the tax liability, you can only and only deduct your tax benefit amount. And that is a very logical thing, students. If you do not understand the logic behind this 20%, or if you do not understand the logic behind not writing 1250 over here, then please feel free to ask me personally, because I will elaborate you that why I didn't directly write 1250. Okay. See, 1250 can only be deducted from our incomes. If HMRC have allowed me to deduct 1250 from this 40,000, then I was happy to deduct 1250. But now they are allowing us to deduct the amount from our tax liability. Okay, so tax liability is the 20%. We have levied the tax on 20%. So whenever you deduct any amount from tax liability, it will always be written on the basis of the tax benefit you receive. And from 1250 of the marriage allowance, our tax benefit is 20%. So that is why I will only be able to deduct the 250 pound only. So students, if anyone asks you that how much marriage allowance you can get, then your answer should be 1250. And how much will be the tax benefit from marriage allowance, then it will be 250. Now if someone asks you that how much marriage allowance you can deduct from the tax liability, then your answer should be 250. Okay, this is the total marriage allowance that you receive, and this is the tax benefit from marriage allowance. Students, I hope you are getting this point, and this is the whole concept of the marriage allowance. Basically it's nothing. Let's just revise the concept. Both the parties has to be the basic rate taxpayer. The transfer of the personal allowance can be possible between spouses only. The third point is that the maximum limit of the marriage allowance is 1250, and then after you also have to take care that you cannot deduct marriage allowance anywhere. You can deduct marriage allowance from directly your tax liability only. And when you deduct the marriage allowance from your tax liability, you cannot deduct 1250. You can only deduct the tax benefit amount only. Okay. So I hope you got the idea. This is the notes, students. Yes, here you can say both the spouses are basic rate taxpayer, then personal allowance of 1250 can be transferred The receiving spouse do not have an increased personal allowance. See, the receiving person do not get increased personal, but they entitled to the tax reducer. That means the reduction from your tax liability of £250. Okay, if suppose your tax liability is less than 250, then it cannot create the refund. Okay, if suppose you are having the just tax liability of £100, then you cannot say that give me back my 150 of refund. No, you cannot claim refund of 150 if your tax liability is just £100 then. Okay, so that was all about the marriage allowance. Let's do the sum, one sum on the marriage allowance over here. Please focus over here. See, this is the illustration 6 from the Kaplan. If you do have Kaplan, it's okay. If you also do not have Kaplan, then feel free. Don't worry about anything. The same PDF, same image will be there in your Google Drive folder. Just download it somewhere, and here it's, otherwise you can see on the screen also. So Kevin and JD are married. Kevin is employed and has employment income of 35,500. See, this is your total income. See, 35,500 is your total employment income. Now out of this 35,500, I will first of all have to deduct the relief, if any. Right now I don't think there will be any kind of relief, so it will become my net income automatically. And once it's a net income, out of the net income I will have to deduct first of all the personal allowance of that particular person. Then after, the Judy spends most of her time looking after their 2 children, but works on a Saturday. That means they are talking about the wife. Works only on Saturday and has employment income of 6,000. They do not have any other income. Judy makes an election to transfer the marriage allowance to Kevin. That means to husband. Calculate Kevin and Judy's income tax liabilities for the tax year 2021. Okay, so let's do the let's complete the sum over here. Now it's a very small kind of the sum, so that is why I am not writing, I am not doing the sum on the Excel sheet. First of all, let's consider the wife aspect. Now, as given in the question, the wife only works on the Saturday, and the wife's total employment income is just 6,000. And then after, we are going to deduct the personal allowance of the wife, and maximum personal allowance is 6,000 because the wife do have a very limited income. So wife's taxable income will be 0, and we can say wife's income tax liability will also be 0. Tax liability will also be 0. Okay, now let's talk about the husband. When we talk about the husband, first of all, the total income of the husband is 35,500, I think. Yes, 35,500. Then after, we are going to deduct the personal allowance of husband, and that is 12,500, right? And I wish that HMRC allowed me to deduct marriage allowance over here. If they allowed us to deduct marriage allowance over here, then I will deduct 1250. Why? Because I am deducting from my income, from my total income. Okay, but they do not allow us to deduct marriage allowance from here. They are allowing us the tax reducer. The effect of the marriage allowance will be just like tax reducer, 35,500. So I just have to perform the calculation normally. Personal allowance of the 12,500. So it will be 500, and then 10,000, 25, and then approximately 23,000 of the income will be there, and that will be taxable income of husband. Taxable income of husband is 23,000. Now I will have to calculate the tax liability. So assume that all the incomes are non-saving income. 23,000 of the incomes are there. First of all, we're going to utilize starting rate band, which is the £5,000 utilize against non-savings income. 5,000. See students, even if I know that this whole tax calculation is very easy, but still I am making an habit to prepare both the workings. Otherwise, I can directly apply 20% tax rate over here on the 23,000. But why I am making each and every calculations perfectly, just to make an habit, just so that I cannot forget this whole workings, the whole system of calculating the tax liability. Okay, So after I will have to give second effect over here, multiply it with 20%, and then after basic rate band 32,500. But I do have once again the limited income over here. Only 18,000 of the incomes are now left to be taxed. So multiply it with 20%, 18,000, okay, against known savings income. So I can say my tax liability, just a second, let me calculate. Tax liability will be 23,000 multiplied with 0.2, 4,600 will be my tax liability. 4,600. Out of that, students, I will going to get the marriage allowance, but marriage allowance can only be deducted as an tax benefit amount, as an tax reducer. So maximum limit is 1250, multiply it with 20%. So I can deduct maximum to max £250. So the remaining figure, students, will become my final tax payable to HMRC, and that is 4350.